And so what we're seeing right now with this ICE terror, maybe the individual agents they may be motivated by, money because they're getting all these bonuses, etc. Or they may be motivated by the fact that they are completely ignorant to what they're actually doing, or maybe they signed up thinking it was something else, like they were going after criminals, or maybe they are these people who, in some cases, do think like that, who could care less about disrupting families, who could care less about the fact that this is the ancestral homelands of these people, because they are trying to implement a white settler, their completion of a white settler colonial project.
You're listening to Reparations in Action here on Black Power 96.3.
Reparations now!
On this episode of Reparations in Action, African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess interviews Lupe Carrasco of Union del Barrio.
I just again want to welcome you, compañera, comrade Lupe, to Reparations in Action. And this is the radio show which broadcasts on Black Power 96 FM out of St. Petersburg, Florida, but it's also will be posted on the internet or any place that you get podcasts. And, just to say that Reparations in Action is the show of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and Black Power 96 FM is the station of the African People's Education and Defense Fund, which is very much part of the Uhuru movement and close to the African People's Socialist Party. And as you are probably aware, APSC, the Solidarity Committee, is the organization of white people under the leadership of Chairman Omali Shatella and the Uhuru movement, African People's Socialist Party. And our work is to organize in the white communities to build solidarity and reparations to African people. And we are very, very welcome to have you with us today, Lupe Cardona, who is a leading member of Union del Barrio, the organization of Mexican indigenous people organizing for self-determination, the return of your stolen land, and national liberation. And I know that you are based in Southern California primarily, but we can talk about more, where you are and what Union del Barrio is doing. I'm very excited to hear everything. But just wanted to say quickly that Union del Barrio was formed in the 1980s when the headquarters of the African People's Socialist Party was also in California. It was based in Oakland, California. And the party and the Uhuru movement and Union del Barrio have deep, decades-long working relationships.
Yep.
And again, it is a great honor to be able to speak with you today. So I just also, before we started, wanted to salute Adriana, Harry, Benjamin, Ron, Chavo, and so many other powerful leaders that I've had the honor to meet and, just to see you in action over the years. So Uhuru, greetings, welcome, Lupe. Thank you
Uhuru,
for coming on.
thank you for having me. This is very exciting for me because, as an organization that works alongside the African People's Socialist Party, it's an honor to be here to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing as well.
Splendid. That's fantastic. So, well, just to start, you are a member of the Central Committee of Union del Barrio. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, when you joined, how long have you been a member, and why you wanted to take this step to be a member and a leading member of this profound organization?
Yeah, I definitely think, the path leading me here started before I was born. It was laid out before I was born with my father, Antonio Isidoro Medrano Carrasco, who was, a migrant farm worker as a young child alongside, his 12 siblings and many cousins and aunts and uncles. throughout the U.S. Southwest, which made him really have a consciousness of understanding that labor was being extracted from his family members, and it was being reciprocated with a profound disrespect and oppressive conditions. So as he, grew up, the movement, the Chicano movement, alongside of the, Black Power movement, etc., was like, it was really shaping him. It really shaped him profoundly. And so by the time I was born, he was very deliberate in ensuring that I was both educated on the history of my own people, and to be always working alongside my people for the benefit of all the people, and not to forget where I come from, but also to be in solidarity with other oppressed peoples. And so that was something that made sense to me. It was something that I was taught, but it was something that as I grew and matured and learned and studied, it made sense to me as something that I believed in my own self, right? It was much, a part of me. And so, as a young person growing up with that consciousness, it can be very difficult because in the school systems, there's that void, right? That you're alongside the people that you see as your people, but oftentimes there's that internalized oppression and mentality where you start to see a lot of horizontal violence. I grew up in the 90s. That was like my high school, heyday, and into my college, and that was also a time in Los Angeles when there was a lot of violence, gang violence, and so so that became something to me that was difficult to navigate, because on the one hand, I was very much having the consciousness of being proud of who I am and where I come from. But at the same time, I'm seeing that the people in my direct community are inflicting a lot of there was a lot of that violence that was happening within, and there was no sort of solution in terms of like education, teaching us to be proud of who we are, where we come from, and to be in solidarity with other peoples. And so it was very confusing to me, and I had a very difficult time in my high school years. But then eventually, as I became a very young mother, like many of the people in the community where I grew up in Oxnard, California, like a lot of my cousins. And so I started to go to a community college where I took a Chicana and Chicano studies class. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, what I was learning in the community about movement from my father and my family is something that is very powerful and profound to learn about in your school. So that's when I started to see my worlds come together, because I was always an intellectual thinker, but I wasn't being that wasn't being like nurtured in me. I wasn't being fed in the school system, because it was very, like rote memory type, and, like very like Eurocentric ways of learning and ways of thinking that was being fed to me. And I had enough knowledge to sort of understand that and not feel fed. And that changed the whole trajectory of my life, because taking that class made me see how important education was, and how important it was in terms of like saving lives, in the lives of our community members who may feel lost. And so I continued to go to school, and I became an educator.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and so as an educator, I was very good at the beginning about teaching about movement, but I hadn't quite understood, like, it's not just about teaching, it's about living that and continuing that movement in solidarity with other peoples who are also in their movements, right? For self-determination, and for like a world that we need, that is a world where we can all thrive and live in freedom. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and so that takes me to, how I was on the path of fighting for in the state of California ethnic studies, which brought me in connection with people who are members of Union del Barrio, specifically somebody, Pablo Aceves, who was,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I love Pablo.
Yes.
Presente.
Very miss him so much.
Yes.
Yes.
He's an amazing person. And I chaired on a committee with him, the National Chicano Moratorium Committee.
I
And
remember that.
yeah, that was in 2015. And so he was the one who recruited me into the organization and
Wow.
been a member for 10 years,
Wow.
right? Yeah, I've been a member for 10 years and it was difficult because, when you're a member of an organization that is disciplined, you have to really, learn how to work within the organization. We all have similar goals in terms of what we want to see in this world and what we hope to see in terms of freedom, but sometimes we have different ideas about how to get there. And so, being a member, you have to really understand that you have to work with the collective, what the collective wants, and go with it, even if it's not what you think is to
Right.
get you there. But I have learned to really love and trust some of the people that you mentioned: Adriana, Harry, Benjamin, Ron, Chavo, Desiree. Some
Yes,
of
Desiree.
Yeah, they're like they're so amazing and
Yeah.
powerful, and I feel very blessed to be organizing alongside them because and honestly it makes me feel stronger because I'm among some of the greats who think like me and who know that we deserve something better, and we are doing the best that we can to start, putting that something better plan into action.
Wow. I mean, that's very moving, compañera Lupe. That's very, thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
That's very, very moving. And I just wanted to ask you, it was also very moving that your father was, that you learned from your father and that your father was part of a movement
Mhm.
for the Mexican people, for the indigenous Mexican people. And could you say a little bit more about him?
Yeah.
That was an incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. My father was he's an ancestor. He's been gone for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But he was one of the persons who I loved the fact that he modeled um, treating others with true humanity. He wasn't one that used these like superficial ideas to judge others. He treated everyone as equals. And I got to see that in my life, the compassion that he had, and also his strength. He, as a Chicano organizer, his area of organizing was around healthcare for people who did not have access to healthcare, and also like
Wow.
combating environmental like racism. You know,
Wow.
and so yeah, he most definitely taught me about humility, and how like really like what is real and what isn't real, right? I think a lot of times, like our students, for instance, have these false ideas of what it means to be successful, and it's usually based on consumer goods, right? And this capitalistic, hyper capitalistic country that we live in. And so my father was excellent at helping me to understand that the value of a person is not the value of whatever they are wearing or how they look and the things that they possess. And so, yeah, that completely changed
That's
all of my
powerful.
life. Yeah. And so as an
Beautiful.
educator, like that's what I try to help my students to understand as well,
Mhm.
which is really powerful because our students come from countries that are being completely tapped. They're rich nations that are their resources are sucked out in order for this nation to hyper consume.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I want my students to understand that their poverty and their forced migration is not their creation. But we
Yes.
do have a responsibility, once we understand that, to try our very best to not perpetuate that, here. And, it's very difficult because our youth are very, caught up in social media, and social media have the power to, it does have the power to, in some ways, make production of ideas, free, production of ideas,
Mm.
more democratic, but it also has been, like taken over by, mass commercialization, and helping our students to understand that, these influencers are actually just like seemingly like community, like giving community knowledge, but really what they are is like very intriguing commercials. Like they're providing
Right.
commercials for these consumer goods, and that can be a little painful for our youth to understand, but it's important for them to understand so that they can make decisions based
Mhm.
on things that are real and not these things that are being fed to us that are real.
Wow, that's so right, and just really appreciate that. And let me ask you, before we go on as well, can you give us the basics? What would you say are the basic principles of Union del Barrio, and when was it founded? And just say a little bit about what it represents, this incredible organization, when you were founded, and the
Yeah.
kind of work that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded in 1985 on a very important day, August 29th, which is, the famous 1970 August 29th Chicano moratorium against the war in Vietnam. And so our founders were really, and I appreciate them so much for, we're really reckoning with the fact that there wasn't really an organization that was continuing the goals of the Chicano movement as it had first started, which were, like self-determination, and also like, in the case of Union del Barrio, just socialism, to be against capitalism,
Mhm.
and imperialism, and against, the war in Vietnam was very much an example of an imperialistic war. And so we were founded at that time, and we are Raza internationalists. And so to me, that makes a lot of sense because, especially here living in Los Angeles, even though my ancestry is, it's the border of Mexico and the U.S. My family has always been on that area, which is on both sides of the scar that is the U.S.-Mexico border.
Right.
Um, but I'm here, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand with my siblings that are from El Salvador, from Guatemala, from Honduras, from
Mhm.
Nicaragua, from Venezuela, from, all of these other nations as well. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense that we have a shared history of imperialism by, the European countries, the European colonization, and then also the U.S. imperialism that exists to this day. And then, then we have this extra layer of living here in the belly of the beast, and having, like there's like a cultural, like a forced assimilation that happens in our students. So my understanding is like that we all are, distinct peoples, we come from distinct histories, but we also have a lot of shared history, specifically as it comes to imperialism and, forced assimilation, et cetera. And as a Chicana with my roots on both sides of the border, I find myself to be more powerful and have more like that sense of like standing and knowing of who I am, not as a foreigner, not as a or an immigrant. When I know my history and I'm rooted and connected, and I find that the other raza who live in California or in the in the United States have that similar sort of history and need to also be rooted and connected.
Mhm.
And so I find myself very much in solidarity with my siblings, my other raza siblings, and that is why I and Unión del Barrio are very much raza internationalists, and
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Rasa International as well.
yeah,
Yeah, the thing that I remember hearing, the whole struggle of Mexican indigenous, just being defined that way by Union del Barrio, and that this is stolen land. This land belongs to the indigenous people,
Yep.
regardless of what language, you know, colonialism has forced them to speak. And
Correct.
I think that's you know, what's really, really powerful. It's really, really powerful about, you know, about this movement, about
Mhm.
the Raza internationalism, as you call it.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important also because there are peoples right now that are living here in our Los Angeles who are indigenous from Mexico, Central America, and so forth, and are still very connected to the language and the customs and traditions because they come directly from
Mhm.
communities that are still very rooted. And then there are many of us that are you know, somewhat de-indigenized. You know, there has been a very concerted effort to de-indigenize people because it then kind of levels the playing field in terms of the Europeans who consider themselves to be Mexican or of these other nations to lay claim to the land, very similar to what you see in the United States. And so the recognition of being indigenous is extremely important. And I think what we see in a lot of our raza is this connection that is very much like culturally, linguistically rooted in indigeneity, but is not referred to as such. It's referred to as, you know, being Mexican or being, you know, Salvadorian, et cetera. And so it's very important to acknowledge the indigeneity because that is our ancestry. And if you go, you know, it take you far back into your history for you to see, you know, all of the connections and ultimately, like, you know, you have to know who you are. You have to. And there has been a deliberate effort, as there has been to African people in the US, to also try to hide that history and connection to who you are and where you come from. And, you know, some of it we may never be able to fully reconnect to, but there's a whole heck of a lot of it that we can. And that is something that as an educator and as, you know, a member of Union del Barrio, and also as a mother and auntie and all the things that I am, that I make sure to put at the forefront of what I do in my work and in my culture bearing that I hold as well.
Wow, that's very powerful. Well, just tell us, I know there's a lot of dynamic fronts of Unión de Barrio, and there are a lot of, as you said, educators who are part of it. I know that's one big front, but tell us about it. It just seems like there's so many fronts where Unión de Barrio is working and organizing, or at least has in the past. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, our ultimate goal is, you know, to build socialism. And so everything that we do is really with that sort of objective, like woven through. And so because many of us are educators, it makes sense that that is an area of our work that we participate in. We have healthcare workers. We're building a very strong healthcare worker base,
Wow.
which is really inspiring to me considering my history with my father, who he was not a practitioner of medicine, but he was somebody who organized and wrote grants to be able to fund healthcare projects and
Wow.
and healthcare clinics.
Amazing.
Yeah, he did that in New Mexico and in El Paso, Texas, right along the border, in a place called the Segundo Barrio, you know, the second
Mhm.
name. And so, yes, so those are some of the areas that we work in. And then right now, and always really like the question of immigration, migration has always been something that we work on because it's a natural connection to who we are, right? We are peoples who exist here and also in connection south of the border. And right now it has really like amped up because of the very concerted effort and ICE terror that is happening in our California and across the country. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing has been around that.
Well, yeah, I think the question of the border, of course, I always remember the slogan of Unión de Barrio that you didn't crossed the border crossed you. And, just it's so good. It's so right. And, just the struggle for the land and the unification of all of, as I always hear, I think maybe Benjamin and others, talk about, they say Nuestra America, your America. And that is so powerful. So, so beautiful.
So I wanted just to, to really address the Nuestra America. For me, I find that to be extremely significant because, first of all, our peoples are coming from all over these Americas. But I also want to address the fact that the word America has been co-opted.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and like, people refer to themselves as Americans, and what they're saying is Euro United Statesians.
That's right.
So, a really great indigenous scholar, Jack Forbes, does an excellent job of kind of breaking down the etymology of the word America, which essentially has revealed that America is actually an indigenous word that probably comes from the area that we refer to as Nicaragua. And
really?
yeah, so we have been taught this legend of Amerigo Vespucci.
Yes.
And that's how America came to be named America. But Forbes and other historians, in looking at the historical records, have found that Vespucci was not registered in any of the books as Amerigo, that I believe it was something like Rodrigo or another name similar to that. Right. So they crafted this whole myth of America coming from this Vespucci person, when in reality it is a word that came out of Nicaragua, and it has like etymological connections to words like maraca and other words like that. Yeah, so Nuestra America, to me, knowing that sort of history and that like indigenous root really helps me to embrace it even further.
Wow, I have never heard that. That is so obviously true.
Yeah.
Yes, that's really powerful to know just how everything, like you're saying, becomes co-opted, and they try to turn the meaning from the opposite of what it means, and etc. So, well, thank you for that lesson in history. And tell us a little bit about the struggles against ICE and the current U.S. administration's invasions of Mexican communities. And, I know that as Chairman O'Malley Chatella says, it's not just Trump. I mean, it was Biden as well. It was Obama. Obama didn't he have the largest number of Mexican people who were forced out of the US, anybody. And so, but just this current, very vicious attack that we see, sending the ICE, which are like SWAT teams, the National Guard, even the US military in, and it's clearly, a war against the people. And I've seen things on Facebook of, with Ron and Chavo, and just like really historic stands and fight that people, and I think yourself as well, just standing up to this, really military attempted intimidation, which hasn't worked. So say a little bit about those struggles.
Sure, absolutely. Like just real quickly, I just wanted to share Harry, who's also on the Central Committee of Union del Barrio, does a very powerful talk, a plática, right in front of the border in, I believe it's San Isidro, where you can see a sliver of the history of the fences between San Isidro and Tijuana. And what you see is like the first layer, and I'm going to probably get the layers a little incorrect, but you'll kind of get the point. The first layer is like the Carter, right? The Carter wall, and it's like it's not too high, but it's very obviously there. It's a wall, and then as you progress, you could see the Clinton one is higher. right? And then you continue to look forward, and then you see the Obama one is even bigger, right? It's even taller. And then behind that one is the the prototype of the Trump wall, which is this mega huge wall, and you can see it towering over all of the other layers. But interestingly, in Trump's first term, he only took the prototype from here to there for the big theatrical show. But it was actually Biden who took that wall and finished it all the way over.
That's what, wow. So, so helpful. Thank you for laying that out.
Yeah, so I think that tour that Harry gives is very insightful in us understanding the history of the attacks on people who are labeled as aliens, as foreigners, as immigrants, right? When in actuality, those, constructed lines, those humanly constructed lines, are really just a way to interrupt something that has happened on these lands for thousands of years, and that is migration between, all of our peoples. And we know it from like the linguistic connections that exist from north to south. We know it from the cultural, the artistic, the genetic, and also like there's anthropological evidence that shows us that for thousands of years we have been migrating on these lands. And in this country, which we refer to as the United States, there's been a very deliberate educational, hegemonic process to try to have us forget these histories and connections. And we know that when people understand these connections, it will absolutely fortify this notion of not being an invader or foreign, etc., but being really where your people have been migrating for thousands of years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and obviously, there are people that could care less about that, and that is something that when you listen to the things that like people like Charlie Kirk were saying, it's very obvious that they could care less about those migrations. They could care less about what's right and what's wrong. They are very much asserting that they are the superior, they are the dominant, and they are going to do what is necessary to get everyone else out of their way in order to assert their dominance and power on these stolen lands. And we know that because, there's a very famous recording of him saying, we are not, when there was a reference to being an immigrant, he very proudly says, no, we're settlers and we came here and we built, right? And with no shame at all whatsoever in himself being a settler. And so what we're seeing right now with this ICE terror, maybe the individual agents they may be motivated by, money because they're getting all these bonuses, etc. Or they may be like motivated by the fact that they are completely ignorant to what they're actually doing, or maybe they signed up thinking it was something else, like they were going after criminals, or maybe they are these people who in some cases do think like that, who could care less about disrupting families, who could care less about the fact that this is the ancestral homelands of these people, because they are trying to implement a white settler, their completion of a white settler colonial project, which is like to get us completely out of the way. And here in LA, we have been organizing around community self-defense. And so Union del Barrio did call for, in San Diego and in LA, very early on, a community self-defense coalition, which is very important because we have been doing patrols and community self-defense for a long time, but it was very apparent very early on that we were not going to be enough, that we were going to have a coalition building. And to me, that is the single most important thing that we did November 2024, because every single day there are hundreds of people throughout I mean, hundreds of people physically out there, but thousands that are part of this coalition that can be tapped into at any moment across the county of Los Angeles, across San Diego County, and now even in places like Riverside, Ventura County, Santa
Yeah.
Barbara, Santa Barbara area, the Bay Area, and then of course this has spread throughout the country. And what we are seeing is so many people that are trained in, showing up, not just know your rights, defend your rights, documenting the injustices, the illegal, the human rights violations that are happening right now, and quite honestly, like that for me is the biggest like hope that we have to be able to like defend our communities, is the fact that it's not just the people who are like organizers or members of real political organizations like Union del Barrio, but it's like, the average person in the communities that is feeling empowered to do what is right, to stand shoulder to shoulder with their neighbors, with, their friends, with their family members, etc. And so that has been something that all of our sectors of our Union del Barrio work has really been kind of dedicated to that, because that is right now the largest threat to our community that we see. And it's not just like the indigenous raza that is being impacted. It's most definitely what has been sort of broadcast, media wise, but this is also like the African diaspora in, in these lands here that are also being impacted. And, when we're out patrolling, we absolutely see and talk to with, Haitian folks, Jamaican folks, and even Chinese, Filipino, and other Asian groups as well that are living in complete terror and fear, and who are also organizing in their communities, and who we are also organizing in solidarity with, which is completely going to be necessary in this time that we see this hyper, white supremacy settler project being enacted with the permission of those in the White House and with our tax dollars, which are taken from us, to enact their genocide at home and their genocide around the world.
I mean, that is so inspiring what you're laying out. And, it's really such an honor to have known and to know Union del Barrio, and just the way that you stepped in to step into the leadership of the people, and especially in the midst of these very brutal colonial, attacks by the government. And just that's really, I don't know, I can't say enough. It's very moving, very inspiring, and just very powerful.
Thank you.
I saw on your Facebook page, on Union del Barrio's Facebook page, that there's a press conference around the case of, is it Benjamin Marcelo Guerrero Cruz?
Yes.
And could you
On
tell
Monday.
us about that case?
Yes, absolutely. That's super important. We already knew from what we were hearing on the streets of LA, especially like Chavo, who has been, really leading a lot of the patrol work, that there were not just ICE agents, but we knew that there was like Border Patrol, U.S. Marshals. There were all these other branches of the federal government out here.
Yeah.
Doing ICE terror work, but we also had heard of that there were mercenaries, that there were bounty hunters, right? We kind of had heard rumors that across the country there were laws being already kind of put in place to make that legal, and of course we did not hear about anything here in California because California would not support that, right? And so with Benjamin Marcelo Guerrero Cruz, he's a young person, had just turned 18 when he was was kidnapped in August while walking his dog at 7, something in the morning. Everything that he said to his teacher, because it was actually his teacher who went to Adelanto, the detention facility, to go talk to him because his family was living in fear. So she did the great work of going out there and talking to him, and everything that he described to her as a young 18-year-old person still in high school who isn't as like informed as we are, who organize around this work, just really indicated to us that these were bounty hunters. He essentially
Wow.
said, yeah, absolutely. He said 3 plainclothes men approached him, um, called him a name. He said, "That's not me." And then he did the classic thing that, we have to all be careful in, is we shouldn't really be talking to them. He said, "That's not me. I'm Benjamin." And so they proceeded to zip tie him and put him in a van and said, "We'll take you in and figure this part out later." They released his dog, stomped on the ground so the dog would just run off into the street. And then they took him to a parking lot and waited there for 15 minutes, where they proceeded to joke about how they were going to get $1,500, which was going to be their weekend party money. And we were kind of
Wow.
poking fun at him and laughing. And
Right.
then they, 15 minutes later, ICE agents with the actual uniform showed up, and he witnessed an exchange of paperwork, and then an exchange of him. And he was then taken to Adelanto. There was a brief period of time that he was also taken out of state to Arizona, then returned to Adelanto because of the work happening with the attorney. And so on Monday, it's an important and significant day, because it's a day that we're hoping that the petition for him to be released will be granted. And so we are having this press conference in front of the school district building, because he is one of our students, and we strongly believe that the educators and the district should put all resources behind ensuring that on Monday he will be released, or at least there will be like something signed for him to be released and returned back to his family so that he can finish his school year. He's supposed to be graduating this year. And so we're very strongly supporting this family to the extent that they will allow us to support them, because we want to honor their wishes. But yes, that's what we're going to be doing on Monday at 4:30 at the 333 South Beaudry address of the Los Angeles Unified School District building.
So outrageous. Wow, really appreciate the struggle that you are making. And I know that there are a lot of other court cases and
Mhm.
various fronts that that your organization has been facing even over the last year, or maybe even longer than that. Could you just tell us a little bit, briefly about some of those cases?
Yeah, another one that we took on because it was something that was very important to the community in which we organized, was when this was about 4 years ago, right before the 4th of July kind of fireworks celebrations that happen. And if you know Los Angeles, like the entire city of LA is completely lit up leading up to that day, on the day, and then after, and in some cases all year long as well, depending on your. But what happened was the Los Angeles Police Department confiscated just a ton of fireworks from throughout the neighborhood and put them into a like one of those tractor trailer those bins, those metal bins. And then right in the middle of the community on 27th Street, they had this idea that it would be okay right next to homes, right next to youth and community members, to detonate in mass the fireworks.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it was awful. So we have, people who
it
are
would be like a major explosion.
it was a major explosion. So we have people that are suffering from deafness in their ear. They have other physical things that happen. Some of them, their homes were completely destroyed. Their vehicles were destroyed.
Wow.
And the city essentially just kind of was blowing them off and giving them the minimum. And we're talking about like families, like in some cases that came from, I think a family that had come from El Salvador and purchased a home, back when things were
Mm-hmm.
ish, they worked hard as our community does, right? Our people work hard. And they were able to get to a point where a very like blessed point where they paid off their home and now their home's completely destroyed. And the city was not doing anything to compensate these families. And as you know, like now in this day, what they purchased the home for 30 years ago is not what you would need to be able to replace that home today. And so, Union del Barrio continued to organize with and support these families to getting what it is that they were due. And last year, I believe it was a $27 million, it was finally settled for that, which
Okay.
is yeah, which is good because now the families are able to get back on their feet. I think it's still unclear if that is enough. It's still unclear, like, because Los Angeles is a city that has, for very long has been impacted by this, this like very greedy system that is regulating these increased costs of rent and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
increased cost of everything that is generated by these capitalists that want to extract as much from every transaction as possible. So we've got people living, sometimes three families in a home. And I've been hearing also like with one of the attorneys that we work very closely with that helps our community members that are dealing with housing issues, tell us that like we've got homes that were meant for 3 bedrooms that are being sliced as much as like 6 bedrooms so that they can charge higher rents. And so we've got people living in very tiny rooms, and sometimes a whole family is renting one of these tiny rooms. So you've got multiple families living in these homes. And then you've got, and then this explosion of these homes in these neighborhoods is just not acceptable. It just makes a bad situation even worse for many families.
Wow. Well, it's been really, really powerful to be able to speak with you, Comrade Lupe, and I appreciate this so much. And, there's just so many powerful things, such great, great work and very inspiring work of Union del Barrio overall. And, I just wanted to know before we close out if there was anything else that you wanted to make sure was that you wanted to report on or mention. And of course, we want to get your website and your contact information out to people as well.
Absolutely. I think the last thing that I'd like to leave with is that this our utmost solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party and with the chairman and chairwoman. Very inspiring the work that is done through the African People's Socialist Party. And I've had the benefit of going to St. Louis and seeing like the Anwo Center as it's in its infancy. I haven't seen it since last year, and just seeing a lot of the beautiful projects there that are being created for the African people. And I was very inspired by what the chairwoman shared with me when I commented on how I really appreciated how many of the projects are created, not just enough to be able to do the work that is being intended for each project, but that it's done beautifully in a way
Yes,
very
yes.
Afrocentric and is very inspiring. And something that she said in return to me just really inspired me. And she said, "Nothing but the best for the working class African people." And
That's her. That's Deputy Chair Ona. Ona
it's like
Shatapa. Yeah.
I absolutely, absolutely am inspired and really here in our Los Angeles and in our areas where our raza are, really am inspired to do that similar type of work and ensure that our people have also those opportunities to to do projects and do work that really ensures self-determination and really ensures that we get the best that we deserve. We work, we contribute, and we should be able
Yes.
to to benefit from that, from the fruits of that very beautiful and powerful labor.
Wow, that's powerful. And yeah, and I really want to ask you to invite you to come, to St. Louis again.
Love
And,
it.
various members of Union come from time to time and for events. So looking forward to seeing you again. But it's wonderful to speak with you. We were watching a powerful video of Ernesto Bustillos, the late great comrade, from the website of Union del Barrio, where he's talking about what is democratic centralism and why we have to be cadre, and very moving, very powerful, and just really, represents the spirit of Union del Barrio in so many ways. So,
Yeah.
so give us your website, just, put out all the information that you would like people to get.
Sure.
And yeah, before we go.
So there's the Union del Barrio website, right, which is, I believe it's uniondelbarrio.org. And there's also the Association of Raza Educators website, which is razaeducators.org. I have a website that I use for some of my educational work. It's guadalupecardona.com. And my handle on social media is Lupe Teaches Ethnic Studies.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can find me, Lupe Carrasco Cardona. Google me, you can find me.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, it has been such an honor to speak with you today. Just really, really powerful, Lupe Cardona, and I hope that we'll see you again in St. Louis. Please give my regards to all of the great comrades of Union del Barrio and to the leadership, and miss you all. It's always great to see you and just salute you profoundly. Just want to say uhuru and thank you.
Uhuru, Penny, thank you. And please also give my my regards to all of the comrades over in St. Louis and beyond.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
This has been an episode of Reparations in Action, a biased podcast of white solidarity with Black power. We'd like to thank our team of volunteers. A shout out to Burning Spear Media Director Akile Anayi, as well as Black Power 96, WBPU LP St. Petersburg, and the station manager, Mr. Eddie Maltzby. If you like what you've heard today, you can go to Apple Podcasts and rate this podcast. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, or if you would like to join our volunteer team, you can email us at ria@blackpower96.org. That's ria@blackpower96.org. A special thanks to Chairman Omali Eshatella and the African People's Socialist Party, without whose relentless leadership and theory of African internationalism, none of the understandings presented on Reparations in Action would be possible.